give us an example of, a project that went really well and, something that you've done that maybe could have gone a little bit better, right? Because not as much as we want to believe that every project's gonna be perfect, just having that sense of, what went well, what didn't go well, and what could have been better. That's I think are good type of examples for folks to see that, even the best have, some bumps in the road. So let's start with you, Chris, and then we'll go to Fred.
I've got a project that did both simultaneously. So yeah, one of the first things I did when I joined CrossMe, one of the first things I do pretty much every organization I join is to make sure we turn on MFA in whatever directory service that we're using, Google, O365, Azure. They all support it. I think it's available on every, I'm not familiar with everyone's pricing tier, but I think it's available to everyone at this point. I know even Salesforce is pushing it out mandatory for every account now. But one of the first things I did, let's turn that on, right? Really having a good understanding of what each setting means in your environment is really critical. So we turn this on, right? We're a fast growing startup. We're hiring people very quickly. There was basically a race condition we unintentionally created in that authentication step where if the new account had not already turned on MFA, they could not log in. So we basically prevented new users from actually being able to log in because they've never logged in to set up MFA. So we didn't have there's basically a grace period from the time the account is created and when they log in to actually set up MFA. So yeah, that attention to detail, I think that's something that, a lot of folks that might resonate with in a startup moving really quickly. You're trying to enable the business. Like Fred said, we're really in an operations role. That is our purpose. But that was a really good example of we got MFA on for everyone, but unintentionally locked out new hires on their first day. Easy remedy, right? Very very quick setting to change. But yeah, that attention to detail when you're moving that quickly is really critical.
Fred, do you have a good story? It doesn't have to be a JumpCloud, just, here
Chris,
in the past.
sure. Chris, I feel like that was a easy one, but I'll dig in a little deeper. So in a time when we first started implementing MFA and password resetting and account lockouts, so not a in JumpCloud land, but in another place, one of the challenges was because there was potentially latency for doing work in different places, using something as a vehicle to allow you to have access, like an RDP connection or something like this, requiring MFA in this process continually wound up locking out accounts because of the timing difference between all of these systems. And so we had thought, hey, great, we're going to make sure that nobody can, spoof a session here. And regardless of where you come from, this makes it easier for us to do this work. And it turns out that, that probably wasn't the best implementation of MFA, given how that system for access was manifested. What we did instead was went to the system we were accessing and brokering through, and we used browser extensions here to do more of the access control. And so that worked out better. But the challenge there was obviously when accessibility is the requirement for you to do work, and this has very specific needs when you do have accessibility requirements, and you don't have those, then obviously you've inhibited the business as opposed to, secured it. So good lessons to learn across the way that sometimes the best implementation is different than the way that it should be designed from your initial, your initial purview.
Awesome. So I think, both of you guys brought up really great examples, and it actually opens up another question, right? Like, so, zero trust we talked about earlier is a progress that has to happen, right? Like between you got to crawl, walk, run, and do things in various steps. So starting with you, Chris, right? Like part of that journey also means the ability to communicate to leadership, like what are some of the goals and milestones that you meet. So if you can talk to us a little bit about, just that sort of communication with the execs, right? Because like there's a tendency to say, let's go buy that magic box, put it in there, press that red button, and everything works. But just a little bit about, just that partnership over time and what to expect and sort of the communication with execs, and then we'll ask the same question to Fred.
So I think in a B2B startup, like I work in business to business where we're selling to other businesses versus, someone in a business to consumer organization, really translating all that back to whatever the company goals are, right? Is this going to increase deal velocity? Is it going to increase trust with existing customers, with prospects that are in the sales pipeline? So I think really taking it all back to that, like you don't need to go through and I try to avoid being technical at all costs, right? I don't need to talk about this is why we're switching from this antivirus tool to this EDR tool, right? Like they don't need to know that part. They need to understand the why of how this equates to your ARR goal for the year, how many customers you want to bring on the platform. So I think making sure you're able to put it in their language, look to your peers, right? Like finance doesn't go down in the weeds on like how they do all the little nitty gritty accounting things. It's how much money came in, how much is recognized in your revenue. It's easy to understand, right? You don't need to be a CPA to understand what your CFO is saying, and your CFO shouldn't need to be a cybersecurity expert to understand what you're saying. So I think putting a lot of time and effort into making sure you're translating that. So an example, everything we've put into place since I've joined Crossbeam and other organizations, I've mostly worked at B2B SaaS companies, is really, okay, how is this going to increase trust, right? And I look at it from the standpoint of kind of your digital curb appeal, right? Let's say you're going to buy a house, you drive by the house, the grass is a foot high, the fence is falling over, there's broken windows. You could probably assume what the inside of the house looks like. And if you're kind of digital curb appeal, like, how does your SSL rating look? Are you an A or a B on SSL labs? Do you have DMARC? These are basic things. Yes, it's not going to prevent a data breach, but it shows the level of maturity in that organization. And yes, like the executive team doesn't need to know what your SSL score is, but they need to know how that's going to increase trust with your customers and your customers, your peers in that customer side, right? Your cybersecurity peers that are going to be looking at your business because they need to do a security review. You're a third party. So I think that's really important to make sure that translation is happening and that everyone gets it. And you're paying really close attention. If no one's asking questions, it's just a lot of head nods. That could be an indicator that it's really not resonating, and they're just saying, "Yeah, I know cybersecurity is important. We hired you because you're an expert. Yeah, go do what you think we should do, right?" So I think that those are the types of things you need to be paying attention to for the executives, for your board, and even your employees too, right? This is everyone's responsibility. It's not just you in a vacuum.
And Fred, same to you, right? Like what are some tips on the communication side and on how to communicate progress and all that good stuff?
Well, I think there's you got to take people on the journey with you as a starting point. Chris alluded to that in a number of different ways there. But the other thing I would say is that, and this isn't always easy because it is different at every place that you go, which is the curb appeal is a good analogy, but what are the things that resonate most around how the business, should be concerned about what this impact has on them, right? And that is different everywhere you go. Threat model is different, depending on what you decide to go do. The risk to the business is different overall, corporate risk, cyber risk, short. And then, the way to think about that too is, I think oftentimes people come in and they do get a good sit rep. They sit down and sort of look around and see what's going on. They're like, okay, there is a ton of things to do. Let's go do all the things, right? And in that case, right, you sort of lost not only the crusade you're on with any followers, but you've also gotten to a place where somebody's got to determine if you're going to implement this one thing or that one thing. And that's a difficult place to get to when you just get started on a journey like that. So I think it's important to understand and to think about, come in with top three prioritized things, places to start. Do a good job there, and continue to build incrementally and make sure that people understand the value of those things. I like to think in terms of a maturity model for almost anything, whether it's CMMI or other things, but it's a relation to be able to draw improvement as opposed to measure output. And I think those things are different, and they also calibrate better to a growing business. And it's a way to think about that in a way that the board can also resonate around, that investment dollars and or business spend is going to the appropriate places to improve and grow the business.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.